Welcome. We are glad you're here today. And I want to let you know that this meeting is being recorded. And if you don't mind muting yourself unless there's a question and answers for later. Fondren Library's Green Team was recently one of the 5 academic libraries awarded the American Library Association's grant for Resilient Communities, Libraries Respond to Climate Change. Even before winning the grant, though, Fondren became a climate resilience hub designated by communities responding to extreme weather, which is referred to as CREW. Fondren is the 17th hub designated by CREW, but the first in the US not located in Massachusetts. This is important because we just finished a record hurricane season. Of the 30 storms this year, 12 hit US shores, another record number. The previous record was 9. In addition, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has said that 2020 is the 6th consecutive year in which 10 or more billion-dollar weather and climate disaster events have impacted the US. Today, we are absolutely thrilled to have the program manager of CREW, Reverend Vernon K. Walker, talk to us about what it means to be a climate resilience hub and how important community resiliency is in these times of extreme weather. Reverend Walker's work on social justice has been featured in different media outlets, including the Boston Globe, Boston Herald, Bay State Banner, and the Commonwealth Magazine, among others. He has also made TV appearances on various Boston TV channels, including Fox 25, New England Cable News, Boston Neighborhood Network, CBS Boston, and NBC 10 Boston. Reverend Walker has a Bachelor's of Science in Organizational Leadership and a minor in psychology from Penn State University. He also has a master's degree in theological studies from Boston University School of Theology. Reverend Walker is also the current public policy director at the Young Democrats of Massachusetts. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Walker today.
Well, thank you so kindly for reading that, Julie. And hello all from Massachusetts here. I am elephant happy and peacock proud to be with you all today. That you've cut some time out of your schedule to be here today with us. Again, that makes me just hippopotamus glad. And certainly we're here to talk about a very intriguing subject, preparing for extreme weather. But before we get into preparing more for extreme weather, I like to present an overview of where we are in terms of society and the world in the midst of this pandemic, etc. So it is interesting and fascinating that although we've come from different walks of life, we are here gathered virtually around this concern of extreme weather and how to prepare for extreme weather. Certainly extreme weather looks different according to the part of the world that you live in, but we know that climate change affects everyone. Additionally, we are living in some very dark and difficult days, the likes of which we have never seen before. There are many injustices happening in our world today that manifest in the forms of racism, sexism, ageism, classism, xenophobia, environmental devastation, and other forms of oppression. However, I believe that the preeminent social justice issue of our time is climate change. For those who don't know, climate change is a change in the Earth's long-term global temperature and weather patterns. The planet is in a great state of distress because of climate change. The climate crisis, it represents an urgent and existential threat to our civilization, which in 2018, an international consensus of scientists from the UN agreed that humanity must drastically reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 45% in 2030 and reach net zero emissions by 2050 if the world is to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius without endangering the existence of humans. From shifting weather patterns that threaten our food production, to the rise in sea level that increase the risks of catastrophic flooding, the impacts of climate change are global in scope and unprecedented in nature. The effects are devastating in nature and dangerous in reality to all natural ecosystems. As we mentioned earlier, the climate change is a defining issue of our time, and we are at a defining moment. If human beings don't take drastic action today, adapting to these climate impacts in the future will be more challenging and costly. But what we must understand, people of goodwill, is that climate change is not a single issue alone. It's not an isolated issue alone. However, it's not a special interest alone. Additionally, it is rather multifaceted and complex crisis affecting public health, foreign policy, jobs, the economy, labor, civil rights, immigration, agriculture, our food supply, housing, transportation, the survival of nature, and every facet of human life. The failures and the injustices of our economy and our actions on climate are linked, and addressing climate change will require a rethinking of the economy from the ground up. And what we need is candidates who seek public office, rather on the local, state, or federal level, to address these challenges in their rhetoric and address these challenges on their platform. The fundamental challenge of overcoming wage and wealth inequality, expanding jobs, promoting environmental justice, improving food access and public health, promoting the rights of women and immigrants, and defending low-income communities and communities of color. And such. Because we know that addressing these issues will save hundreds of millions of people in frontline communities and low-income communities and coastal communities from climate-related poverty, impeding catastrophic storms and wildfire damages, and will prevent the extinction of many of the world's insects, plants, birds, and other animals for candidates who seek to be elected officials addressing these issues in their platform. And not only addressing these issues in their platform, but implementing these issues once he or she gets in office. The present and future state of our world seems dark and hopeless. It seems like there are many floods of chaos, storms of confusion, winds of mayhem blowing in our world today. Unfortunately, we see mass shootings happening regularly, a disregard for human life playing out daily in the media, a lack of concern for our other human beings happening frequently. Children, along with adults, can't feel safe in many places, as there has been mass shootings in movie theaters, schools, places of worship, etc. Yes, although it seems hopeless, as some of the old prophets would say, as one prophet had written in the scriptures, that prophet was facing a difficult time, essentially uttered the words of being a prisoner of hope. I am a prisoner of hope. It is only in the darkness that you can see the stars shine brightly, as Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King said. The stars that we need to shine will only come about if love is present in our world. It was one great writer who said that hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. What we need in our society today is a moral critique of the structural inequalities that oppress and suppress our fellow human beings. Simultaneously, we need people to come together from different walks of life and stand in solidarity on moral and social justice issues to create what I call a fusion movement. Then change will come. For those who may not be familiar with the terminology fusion, fusion is just another word for another synonym for diverse. So a diverse movement, then change will come. A movement that has different people coming from different walks of life, black, white, and brown, coming together to challenge and critique the to morally critique the structural inequalities in our society. Certainly, I am cognizant of the times that we live in, and there is seemingly hope on the horizon now that we have a Biden-Harris administration, an incoming Biden-Harris administration. It seems like they will roll back many of the bad policies that President Trump has implemented, such as under the Trump administration, protections weakened for 35 million acres of public land, 150 million Americans living in counties with unhealthy ozones or particle pollution. 50 EPA programs have been proposed to be cut in Trump's 2021 budget. And ultimately, the Trump administration decided to pull out of the Paris Agreement. So we know that there will be changes on the federal policy. There will be changes in our federal policies, and there will be a new change of national leadership. And there will be leadership in place who want to embrace the science. But I'm not here to get political with you on today. I'm really here to talk about weather. We must understand that even though there is a new administration coming and there is some efforts to combat climate change, what we must realize is that extreme weather is still present and will grow more intense over time. And this is why the work that we do at the communities responding to extreme weather is vital and important. We believe in building social solidarity and social resilience because we believe that the best way to be climate resilient is to be social resilient. Now, I know many of you are in Texas, or perhaps you are in elsewhere. However, we saw what the Hurricane Harvey had done to Houston a few years ago. Millions, causing millions of dollars, millions in damages. But it was there that we seen an example of people coming together, furniture stores opening up where people can lay on their beds, churches opening up and welcoming the stranger. And it's only then, sisters and brothers, that as this extreme weather will grow more intense over time, it is only then that the social fabric of our local communities will help sustain our communities in combating these extreme weather events, such as extreme heat, such as flooding that happens because of sea level rise, such as hurricane and tornadoes that come because of global warming. So you must understand, sisters and brothers, my worldview is informed biblically. My worldview is predicated on how I understand the sacred scriptures. And I know that there's power when we come together. Yes, I know that when people from diverse backgrounds decide to connect and work together, reach across the aisle in spite of political differences, in spite of religious differences, in spite of ethnic differences, then there's some power there to be able to create some systemic and radical change. I know I'm right because biblically, I saw this when Moses, who had his experience at the burning bush, he had a bush talk to him. I don't know if y'all ever had a bush talk to y'all, a burning bush talk to y'all, but Moses had a unique experience that has never been recorded in human history of a bush, of the divine using a bush to talk to him. The God of Israel telling Moses to go tell Pharaoh, let my children go. But it was then that when Moses had his rod and connected with Aaron, his brother, and they connected with a greater purpose to fight against oppression and injustice, that they went to Pharaoh and they said, let the children of Israel go. And it is then that when the children of Israel connected with a divine purpose, when it also connected with the hands joining hands of the slaves joining hands together under Egypt and marching forward to that Red Sea, that change happened and folks experienced freedom. And that's just one example of the power that is unlocked when people come together. Now, someone among us may not necessarily be religious, and that's fine. However, historically, I know it's power when we come together, because Rosa Parks, I saw it during the civil rights movement, as Rosa Parks, by her action, declared that she was tired of racial and social injustice and refused to stand up when she had been working all day. It was then when she refused to stand up and she refused to continue sitting that the modern civil rights movement was born. And it pulled in and involved many diverse leaders and everyday people connecting and saying that racial justice and racism is wrong. It is then that we saw Dr. Martin Luther King connect with Philip A. Randolph, who connected with C.T. Vivian, who connected with former Congressman John Lewis, who connected with Fannie Lou Hamer, who connected with Ella Baker, who then connected with Rabbi Joshua Heschel, who then connected with some other Jewish rabbis, who then connected with some Quakers, and who then connected with people of goodwill, who then connected with some Unitarian Universalist members, who then connected with some lawyers and some doctors. And it was then that the walls of Jim and Jan Crow fell down. It was then that a groundswell of support rose up to put pressure on elected officials to pass, and the president to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Although the Supreme Court gutted the most powerful provision in the Voting Rights Act, known as Section 5 in 2013, which assured that voting changes in several states such as Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, even Texas, and Virginia were transparent, vetted, and fair to all voters, regardless of race. Even though that happened, there's still power when people come together and form a coalition movement. This coalition will not happen through osmosis alone. It will not happen through federal policies alone. It will not happen through state house policies alone. But this systemic and radical change and this coalition movement that we need will only happen. And this fusion movement will only happen when peace activists join hands with climate justice activists, join hands with Black Lives Matter activists, and those same hands join and connect with faith activists, and those same hands join and connect with people of goodwill activists, and those same hands join with social justice activists, and those same hands connect with youth activists, and those same hands join with elected officials who have the mindset to be public servants. And those same hands join and connect with descendants of slaves and slave owners. And those same hands join and connect with human rights activists. And then, and it is only then, that the arc of the moral universe will be bent towards justice. It is then that we shall experience a revival of love, joy, hope that will help lead to the creation of the beloved kingdom where all people can be good Samaritans one to another, regardless of race, ethnicity, color, or creed. Simply put, this is the hope that I have. In this moment of darkness, as we wrestle with the twin pandemics of the healthcare crisis, the coronavirus, as we wrestle with the pandemic of racial injustice, as we have seen historically and even currently, many Black and brown bodies have been shot down due to police brutality. It is only then that when these hands join together and all these folks connect across the world and across the nation and across the world, and in our cities, in our towns, and in our states. It's only then that the stars will begin to shine brightly. It is only then that North Star will become more transparent and guide us towards a more perfect union. It is only then that the lion can lay down with the lamb. Some of y'all may have never heard the lion and the lamb laying down together, but when it's the beloved kingdom created, it is only then that the wolf can lay down with the dog. The lion can lay down with the lamb. The frog can stand right next to the eagle. It is only then, when love is more present in our world, that social resiliency will be built and that we in our local communities can check on the most vulnerable in our society to ensure that they survive extreme weather events, to ensure that what happened in Chicago in 1995, where 739 people died because of the horrific heat wave, it is then when these hands connect and we develop and hitch our wagon to a purpose greater than ourselves, that we can ensure that when these storms come and the rain descends and the floods are in front of us, that none of us will be left behind because we are connected socially and we are standing in solidarity. And that concludes this portion of the conversation. And I don't know if we're going to open it up to Q&A, but that includes this portion of some of my remarks. I'll turn it back over to Julie.
Yeah, I think it would be great if anybody has any questions. You could put it in the chat, or you could just unmute yourself and ask Reverend Walker.
Don't everybody speak at once. We have room for you.
Tell us more about what your program is doing, Reverend Walker.
Sure. So CREW is a young grassroots organization designed around climate resiliency. And we are based here in Massachusetts, right outside of Boston. We're in the city of Cambridge, which is right outside of Boston. And the program has been around for about almost 3 years now. I've had the privilege to serve as the program manager for almost 2 years now. And we have a pretty robust staff, and we are fortunate and blessed to be able to connect with folks like Julie and the library at Rice, a very prestigious and fine university. And we simply understand that historically the climate justice movement has been predominantly white. And unfortunately, folks of color have not really understood the urgency of the moment. So what we try to do is we have intersectionality panels as one component of our program. You already know about another component of our program, the hubs, as Julie, climate resiliency hubs, as Julie mentioned. But another facet of our program is we have intersectionality panels, and they're on our website. And we're very intentional about seeking and connecting with people who do different types of justice work, because we understand, as we mentioned, and that climate justice cannot be it's not a single special issue, not a single special issue alone, but it is connected, because if communities are devastated, i.e. Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans, then people therefore experience climate related poverty. Therefore, thousands of homes were destroyed in Hurricane Katrina. And because of such, many people moved to other places, and sometimes people didn't have insurance. So they were left with trying to figure out how to survive. And I read one study that said that the PSTD rate, post-traumatic stress disorder, went up dramatically and after Hurricane Katrina with all the survivors. So we know that, although climate change affects every community and every city and every town, we know that, Black and brown communities, coastal communities, frontline communities are hit the hardest. And it's interesting when we look at the pandemic that we are currently in, those who have been hit the hardest are low wealth and poor low wealth communities, communities of color. Those who were never thought of to be essential workers are now essential workers, such as folks that work at the grocery store. Never have people ever thought that they meant, and in general, many people have never thought that that was a profession that was considered critical or front or of a necessity until the pandemic happened, and then we found ourselves. So a lot of what we do now is virtual. We have a climate prep week. Our climate prep week is in September 24th to September 29th, yearly. This year was all virtual. And the theme was racial justice is climate justice. And if you go to our website, and I'll drop it here, you can see all the video. We had 6 central events. I think we had about 54 events overall where other people had done events, but the ones that we hosted are on our website. Yeah, we're part of the Better Future Project. And the Better Future Project has 2 other programs. Some of you all may have heard of 350 with Bill McKibbins. Well, there's a 350 Massachusetts, and then there's a Divest Education program. And Divest Ed is a program where folks work with students to put pressure on university administration to divest fossil fuels from, divest pensions from fossil fuel companies. And essentially what we do at Crew, we try to be non-political. I do wear many different hats, but when I wear my Crew hat, I try not to be too political because we want to really just talk about weather. And, we've had conversations with Democrats, Republicans, independents, and to us, climate change should not be, even though it's a very politicized issue, it should not be political. However, it unfortunately has evolved into a political term. And for us, we just want to talk about weather. And then once we talk about the weather, it's undeniable. The last 4 years have been the hottest, the last 3 years have been some of the hottest years in human history. And it's going to get hotter and it's going to get more intense. And we're unfortunately going to see more storms like Hurricane Harvey. And I think, Hurricane Harvey is a prime example of a community response. And a community responding to extreme weather. And we saw that, lots of stores had opened up. Lots of stores have opened up and let people in, and things of that nature. So that's what we are in, and we're hoping that, with our relationship with the library, that somehow there may be we also have teams, what's called Crew affiliate teams. And these are folks, individuals who are in the neighborhood who want to get together and just figure out how to strengthen relationships with their local neighborhood groups and other folks. And we find that when we connect with neighborhood groups that already exist, it's not something coming up, it's not something being born from the ground up. But yeah, so we are up to a lot. That's a little bit about what we do. And, we're looking forward to building out the relationship with the library here in Houston. I think we have some other questions that came in the chat. I don't know how we want to address those, Julie.
I can read them if you'd like, or is there somebody who wanted to ask a question? I see someone's unmuted themselves.
Yes, this is Dr. King. Hi,
Dr.
Julie.
King.
Hi.
Dr.
How
King,
you-
okay.
How you doing, Reverend Walker? Thank you for that great presentation. I'm Danae King from Texas Southern University, and I'm an environmental justice and climate justice researcher. I work with
Mhm.
Dr. Robert Bullard, who is the father of environmental justice. Yes.
Yes, I'm reading one of his books right now.
Are you?
Yeah, the quest for environmental justice.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I have some questions for you. One, I'd like to know how can you just kind of share with us some of your strategies for community engagement and also how you're educating people of color and low-income communities about some of the complex, I guess, ideas as it relates to climate and weather
Mm-hmm.
and climate justice. That's my
Mm-hmm.
first question.
Okay, well, I can address that one, and Dr. King, and then we can proceed on to the next one if you like. So I come from previously before doing racial justice work. Before doing climate justice work, I had done a few internships with organizations that are doing racial justice work and economical justice work and indigenous justice work here in the greater Boston area. So one of the things that I thought about as I felt compelled to come and jump into the climate space is how can I connect with these organizations that I already know? How can I connect them with what's going on in the climate world? Because unfortunately, it seems like in the social justice world, it seems like a lot of groups that do different type of social justice work get stuck in silos. So I wanted to try to be able to help bridge that gap. So in terms of communities of color, we are, so in Boston, the predominantly three communities of color that we have are Dorchester, Mattapan, Roxbury. I formerly lived in Dorchester. So we are working with a group down in Dorchester that Dorchester is physically the biggest part of Boston when you look on the map of Boston, the city of Boston. So what we try to do is work with pre-existing groups that already have neighborhood councils. So we're working with this one group in a section of Dorchester called Cotman Square, and we are in conversation with, how can we help create a affiliate crew team? And the way I explain, or the way I like to break down the complex ideas of climate change, because it can get real wonky, it can get really stuck in this, so people can oftentimes get stuck in the science of it. I try to break it down to the extreme weather patterns that we see, like Boston is on landfill, and many parts of the city will be underwater if we don't intervene. And the city has like this department called Climate Ready that's trying to prepare the residents here. That's trying to prepare the residents here in the city of Boston. So what I try to do is just really, instead of talking about, certain like neuron portfolios, or I just really just try to break it down where the rubber meets the road, and then show people a map. So we do a lot of presentation. So I normally do a PowerPoint presentation. So when I connected with the group in Dorchester, I normally have a PowerPoint and I show folks, all right, this is where it is. This is the extreme heat that we're expecting to receive. This is how extreme weather is manifesting itself in the New England area. And this is what we can do about it. One of the things that I didn't mention and I omitted was we also, with our hubs, and Julie knows this, we try to send resiliency kits, and we encourage people to make a resiliency kit in their own, like a book bag with essential items that they may need in case of a flood, or in case the rescue squad, the 911 may take a while to get, the firefighters might take a while to get to them if there's an extensive flood and everybody in the neighborhood house is flooded, and the firefighters are trying to get to everybody, trying to put that ladder up and get to every dotty and everybody, but it might take a little time to get to everybody because of the limited human resource power, the available bodies to work in a given community. So what we try to do is encourage people to create their own kit. If they're on medication, they can have medication in it, a flashlight, waterproof matches, things of that nature, so that they can be prepared. They can just grab their bag, a battery operated charger. They could be prepared if they ever run across a situation where they're flooded, they're stuck in their house, and maybe a few hours, the power is out, maybe a few hours before folks get to them. So we try to prepare them in the worst case scenario to have that bag ready. And what we try to do with our resiliency hubs is have them mailed out. Now, obviously, there aren't probably many people on the campus. What we try to do is, have that on display so people can develop an idea of what a resiliency hub is. And I also have a picture of that, like in a PowerPoint, that I also show folks. So simply, that's how we try to communicate, Dr. King and others. We try to break it down to weather and extreme weather. Okay, action B is a result of action A. Action B is action A is a springboard for action B. Carbon in the air, fossil fuels, coal, gas, burning, greenhouse gas effect, these things contribute to this happening. So we try to walk people by step on a basic, fundamental, elementary level. I hope I was able to address your question.
No, that was great. That was great. You have several questions in the chat, so I won't ask my other question, but thank you so much.
No
Wonderful
problem.
presentation.
One question is, what role do libraries play in preparing for and recovering from weather events?
That's a great question. Thank you,
Lisa.
Lisa, okay, thank you for asking that. So in several communities where there has been flooding, I have heard stories of libraries providing an outlet for people to plug into, like they'll plug their things. A resource center, some of the libraries being used by like the Red Cross as a local command center to be able to navigate resources. So libraries are critical infrastructures, a trusted community institution that everybody should know or ought to know about the local library. And I think a library ultimately are safe spaces. And even in the summertime, and it's not or the wintertime, and it's not it's not a weather emergency, you oftentimes you will find people, many types of people in the libraries. I can speak from seeing people without a homes hanging out in the library as a place to cool down in the summertime or warm up in the wintertime. So the libraries play a critical role. I think for us, a lot of our hubs are libraries, and we have a resiliency hub coordinator who works in that area of coordinating the libraries. But yes, I think libraries are critical. They're crucial to developing social resiliency and the social infrastructure. Because, growing up, I'm from Philly, from Philadelphia, West Philadelphia, born and raised. That's where I spent most of my young days, kind of like Will Smith from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. If any of y'all seen that show back in the 90s. Anyhow, in Philly, there's a library in every neighborhood, and for a large part, Boston as well. There's a library in the neighborhood, every neighborhood. And in the libraries, they would allow like different community groups to use the space and, book a room, reserve a room. So libraries is a critical place where social resiliency can be built and social networks can be strengthened, and networking can happen. So I think libraries play a critical role. We have a relationship with the American Library Association. As mentioned, we also have a relationship here with the Massachusetts Library Association. When I say here, I'm talking about Massachusetts. And we're just trying to, we would love to connect with other libraries in Texas, in the Houston area. We would love to connect with them, and if anyone has any connections to some of your local libraries, we'd love to talk to them. And, either myself or one of my colleagues will be more than happy to talk about them. And talk with them, and also maybe encourage them to become a hub.
Well, and it's interesting, Reverend Walker, we do have a few other librarians from other libraries on the call. Keitha Robinson is with Houston Community College, and she is, I'm going to read from the chat. Are there plans with Crew for you to reach out to President-elect Biden's environmental team?
Well, if somebody has a contact, let me know. I'd be certainly glad to. I know there's this other group that I was in conversation with about a month ago, sometime in October, and they had someone on from the team. If President Biden were to win, but if you have a contact, we'd love to connect with them, and to talk more about climate resiliency. Be elephant happy to talk with folks as we're interested. Even though we try to stay non-political, but we think that we're in the process of working with emergency managers of various cities. We believe that it should be a partnership between local government and the community. So we do encourage the fostering of those relationships.
And then there's another question that goes along with what you're talking about in the chat. How do you perceive a way forward in this effort to unite all of us when the terminology of us is seen as anathema by climate change deniers?
Well, I think that's a great question among the many great questions that have been asked. I think the one thing, a path forward, is we must recognize that we're all tied in an inescapable garment of mutuality. What affects one directly affects us all indirectly, as the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said, the other Dr. King. And the reality of it is that I think we're all tied in this garment of mutuality. We're all tied together and connected together in a sense that being created, and this is where my theological belief comes in, for all of us being created in the imago Dei of God. So simply what that means is the image of God. And also, I like what Bishop Desmond Tutu said, that he was a bishop, and he is a bishop in South Africa. He was big in the force in the apartheid movement in South Africa. He simply said that our humanity is bound up one to another, for I can only be human when we can only be human together. So I think for the climate change deniers, this is how I frame it. I just want to talk about weather, because I realize, because the reality of it is we can talk about left, we could talk about right, we could talk about Democrat, we can talk about Republican, we could talk about blue, we could talk about red, we could talk about that all day. We could talk about the polarizations that exist in our society. But the reality of it is that I think what I do, I try to just zero in on extreme weather, even for climate deniers. You can't deny that we just had a hurricane last week. You can't deny that we just had a flood last week, hypothetically, I'm just saying. You can't deny Hurricane Katrina. You can't deny Hurricane Harvey. You can't deny Hurricane Maria. You cannot deny tsunamis that devastate countries like Indonesia, etc. So the reality of it is, there is no, even for the most climate denier, the biggest climate denier, I don't think anyone with a logical and rational mind can deny all these weather events. And it has to have a cause. They can say, well, it's not connected to climate change. But I think one way to have a conversation is, well, these things just don't happen in osmosis. Like, for an example, the last 3 years in human history have been some of the hottest on record. Well, where does that come from? So I think that the way I look at Crew and the work that we do is we are kind of like an introduction to climate justice work. And the way I understand climate justice is in 3 different lanes. I understand it to be the advocacy lane, where you have groups who are pushing for a Green New Deal, which I personally support. You have the resiliency lane, which groups like Crew, resiliency, adaptation, and mitigation. You split that into 2. And then you have groups, the lane of restoration of ecosystems. So you got groups, you got organizations. When I say groups, I'm talking about organizations that advocate for a restoring of green space, and a restoration systems, a restoration of ecosystems rather. So I think on the injustice piece, I think when we talk about racial injustice, there's no denying that, Black and brown folks have received the short end of this stick since the inception of this American experience and the inception of this American experiment. We certainly could see chattel slavery. We could see Jim and Jane Crow. We can see the prison industrial complex. And we can see that racial injustice exists in our society. So, for those who are climate deniers, we can expand the conversation. I think the goal for us at Crew is not only to help people become aware of the climate crisis, but to also help to unlock, for those who don't know, unlock how all this connects, how this intersects. And then not only you just arrive at a cognitive place of how all this intersects and connects, but also figure out a collective action. How can we work together? I like, Dr. King, before he was assassinated, tried to start the Poor People's Campaign. And he did, arguing against racism, militarism, and poverty. In 1967, April 4th, and the speech against Vietnam, he talked about how those things are interlocked and they're related. And now the Poor People Campaign has been relaunched by the Reverend Dr. William Barber, who I've met several times. And the Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, they have relaunched the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And they connect the three issues that Dr. King had talked about in 1967 of militarism, racism, and poverty. They add environmental devastation and changing the moral distorted narrative. And what they mean by the moral distorted narrative is changing, change for religious folk, moving the issue from a moral issue from being prayer in the school, gun rights, and abortion, to moving it to how you treat the poor, how you treat the marginalized, how you treat the disenfranchised. And they simply, base it on the gospel of how Jesus sought to empower those that were on the margin and reach out to those who were on the fringes of society. So if you are interested in that, please check them out. They may even have a state chapter. They have 40 state chapters, so they may even have one in Texas. The Poor People's Campaign, National Call for Moral Revival. So that's one organization I see that trying to bring folks out of their silos together and to work together across social justice issues.
Okay, great. And I think there's time for one more question from Lisa. Can you please talk more about social infrastructure and its role in dealing with climate change?
Oh, sure. I think when we think of previous movements, such as the modern civil rights movement, or we even think about the abolitionist movement, maybe to some extent the women's suffrage movement, we think about there were critical meeting places that people met and connected and exchanged ideas, particularly when we look at the civil rights movement. We saw in Montgomery at several of the Baptist churches, several of the churches played critical roles for people to meet in, that led to the 382-day strike that commenced when Rosa Parks said, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired of injustice." That was simply declared by her actions. And obviously that catapulted the movement. But we also understand that movements just don't happen out of osmosis. I think what's important about that is that the NAACP in Montgomery was already looking for a test case. And they had a woman named Claudette Cloven, who was a model citizen who had the same experience as Rosa Parks on the bus. But the issue then became she had a baby out of wedlock, and the NAACP leaders thought that would damage her being a model citizen in the eyes of the city folks. So I think so we see there how a faith community played a critical role as an infrastructure We see libraries, I'm thinking of here in Cape Cod, which is in Massachusetts, which is not far from Boston. We saw, I heard a story. A crew is part of something called Volunteer Organization Assisting in Disaster, VOADS, and they have a national presence. So if you're ever interested in organizations that do emergency response, and again, crew, we're more on the preparatory, before the emergency, but we are looped into the group. One woman was talking about when there was a flood at Cape Cod and all the power, all the power was out, there was a backup generator at that library, and folks in that community came and they came daily to charge their devices and things of that nature. So that is another example of how social infrastructure can play a part, or organizations that contribute to the social infrastructure of a given community can play a huge role in helping to unite the community. And we even think about in Houston, Joel Osteen's church. I know there was some resistance at first, but eventually that big mega church in Houston opened its doors and welcomed in droves of people to come find shelter and safety in a time of need. I think that's another example of how, important organizations are that contribute to a social infrastructure in a given community.
Thank you so much. That was really wonderful. And before we say goodbye, I also just wanted to mention that currently there is an exhibit at Fondren Library that discusses this ALA grant, the Resilient Communities Grant, and Fondren becoming a climate resilient hub. And there's handouts about how to deal with specific issues regarding extreme weather, from hurricanes and flooding to wildfires and extreme heat. And that is thanks to Crew. So we thank you so much, Reverend Walker, for joining us today and speaking from your heart. I really appreciate your candor and all that you've shared with us today.
No, I'm glad to be here. And I'm looking forward to many, many conversations along the line.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for attending. Thank y'all. Good to see so many of y'all on the Zoom here.
Take care.
All righty.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.